You're listening to 4CRB's interviews and talkback series.
Welcome to the microphone. Welcome to the studio, Supreme Court Judge David Ashton Lewis.
Thank you again. Welcome to you and welcome to all the listeners.
We thought we'd tackle a bit of a fluffy topic today. What does the monarchy, the English monarchy, mean to us today?
Yeah, mean to us as Australians.
Or to even English.
Even English. Look, we have a young man sitting here controlling the panel who is 21, 23 now. Oh, golly, time has gone. And he's English. And I just asked him before we came on air, who was the Queen's father? What was his name? And you, in your caustic humour, said, Dad. And he probably was around the fireplace in Buckingham Palace. But he didn't even know that the man before the Queen was King George VI.
The man with the stutter.
Yes, that Australian helped him overcome it. Mm-hmm. And the question is, that stutter. Well, he was the younger brother, of course, to Edward VIII, who was just an absolute superstar. So the parenting of them, if you read the story, the way they were parented was terrible. No wonder a child would grow with a stutter and no self-confidence. When they did deign to meet when his father, George V, deigned to meet with him, he was gruff, he was distant, and certainly not loving. So
look, when we pose that question, what does the monarchy, what does it mean to us today? My mind goes to it is the foundation of England and the formation of England, and that underpins a very big part of the shaping of the world today.
I think you're right in that. Certainly, look, all we're hearing about now is all the negatives of Britain and its empire. I can say, and I think anyone who's of the same opinion, Britain's given far more to the world of good that's Great Britain, than it did bad. We all do bad things.
Yes.
We then atone for them by doing good things. So I think your statement is correct, but we need to look at it in two ways. What does the monarchy mean in Australia today? As far as, kings and queens, and that probably means very little. But for those of our generation who grew up at a different time, they were the royal family. But it is important to remember they are just a family with their problems. And we saw with the Queen's children, that is, the current king, Prince Andrew, not so much Prince Edward, he and his wife seem to have been good, and Princess Anne the same, although she's divorced. And so we need to look at it more in a sense of what's its relevance and what does it mean in governance?
See, I look at it as it's not the family themselves, it's what they represent. It is.
Yes.
It reminds us of our past. Yes. We were a convict nation of England, and that's where we started as Australians. Yeah. But on the flip side of the coin, it is the Magna Carta, it is the rule of law, it is
Parliament.
It is Parliament. It is how we govern ourselves today, and many countries around the world govern themselves today. I still cherish Churchill's statement that democracy is the worst form of government other than every other one.
Yeah, for sure. And it's right, isn't it? Because he also said there is nothing worse as a member of Parliament listening to one of your constituents speak for 20 minutes and realise, good heavens, I'm representing that, And so, look, there are two sides, as I said, to this, and you've hit really on, I think, the most important side is not them as a family. Sure, they live in palaces, they have honours that everyone gets out of the way for them. Well, that's happened since medieval times with a person who was known as the king or the queen, and then princes and princesses. So that becomes less relevant today. And I think Charles, even as a younger man, sought to be more modern and sought to make himself more of a modern man. But I don't think he's succeeded. I think we'll see that with William. And William has come out already saying, I want to change a lot of things in the monarchy, because it must be very hard to stand when you've got such fabulous wealth around you, things done for you, and seeing the poor, even in modern England today, the poverty in England.
Wow.
Wow. So I think that if you're going to focus on that, there's every good reason for doing what the Europeans did and the Russians did and the French did, get rid of monarchies and become republics. But if there is a sense of your history, of what you have given positively to the world, bearing in mind that Great Britain was the first country to abolish slavery in 1833, outlawed it, had the Royal Navy sailing up and down the west coast of Africa, interdicting slave ships.
Wow.
And dealing with them. So if you concentrate only on the negative, you won't have many supporters for the monarchy.
Look, I'm a big fan of looking at the negative and looking at the positive.
Oh, you must.
The negative is always something that, what can we learn from this? And that's taking a positive from a negative. We do that in science. We do that in engineering. We learn from our past, and we shouldn't be afraid to do that.
Yes.
I get very, very angry nowadays when we want to start to sweep some of those negatives of our past, and we want to forget them, get rid of them out of our past. Let's abolish them from the records. No. They need to stay as a mark of learning.
Well, there are some things that remain important no matter what age you're in, and we will discuss this on the Armistice Day one coming up. But there's movements now in Great Britain to abolish Remembrance Day.
And again, these are the things that we do need to be ever vigilant of. Yeah. We need to make sure that we are relevant in the future, but also where we came from, how we got there, and what our past is never swept away. It is honoured.
Well, that's what has led us to where we are today.
Sure.
But one of the difficulties is that I think if I spoke to most Australians of our age or 30 years younger, and ask them, do you feel you have freedom of speech? Do you feel that you have freedom of association, that your thoughts are not controlled? You'd hear answers like social media just interferes in everything, and I can't speak what I want to speak or I'll be cancelled. The great gift of the woke movement, and yet it came about by a concept of being awake to things. Now, as you've just touched on, the only way you can be awake to things is know the two sides of it, the good and the bad.
Sure.
So that you can say, well, we're never going to do that again, but there's every reason why we should keep doing this. And you can see it you've touched on what England has given. We'll go right back to 1215, the Magna Carta.
Yes.
Now, can you, if you have any knowledge of medieval history and the life of the serf or the villein, as opposed to the life of the lord, the knight, can you imagine a king being threatened, and he must sign a document that says no freeborn man shall be denied his life, his liberty, that is his freedom, or his property, but by the due process of law. Now, when you stop and think on those terms, that's 1215.
Yes.
And John didn't obey it, but fortunately he died the next year. But he signed that under duress, because barons said, you're going to sign. Why? Because he was abusing the law. Now, that's as early as 1215. Then you get the British again in 1692, developing constitutional parliamentary democracy where the monarch is really a figurehead. And yet that didn't happen in Russia and in Germany and in France. They had to murder and overthrow these people. So not just for England, but for the world. These are the gifts that you spoke of, that the English, the British, have given the world, and most of them follow it.
And look, we can talk about the fundamentals of our society, but we can also look at it from the softer components of our society. They gave us Shakespeare.
Yes.
They gave us
Beethoven.
Well, Beethoven was German.
Yeah, well,
but
they gave us philosophy.
They gave us philosophy. They gave us a great many things that founded the world that we live in today.
Well, I asked my group that I teach, a sort of an over 65 years. It's called the University of the Third Age. It's all voluntary, and people come, usually who, as I've said in the past, didn't finish school for whatever reason, but they're all our age, well, a bit older than you. But I said, at school, did you study the Constitution? No. And I went to a school where we did study it, but, it stopped pretty soon. That was 1956 to 1967. So when you don't acknowledge and teach those fundamentals, the pillars on which you are built, it's very easy to have radicals and terrorists pull it down.
Yes, that's right. So, look, it is a fantastic thought process, because we look at today and we see in the tabloids that we're either seeing something to do about Harry, or there is something to do with Charlie's brother, who has disgraced himself and his family. And we focus on the gossip. We focus on, isn't that terrible, or isn't that diabolical? I think the symbolism of who and what they are and where they came from and the foundations of the rest of the world, take their humanity away from the conversation and look at it from what they represent.
Yes.
And it is a magnificent legacy that they've provided.
Well, I think you're right, but there's always that penchant in us to focus on the negative.
Yes.
But we don't do it in certain ways. Like, I've never heard a positive statement about Adolf Hitler.
No.
And he shot himself 5 years before I was born.
And the thing for me is that it's funny how history is written by the victors. If they had been victorious, I'm sure Adolf Hitler would have been the most glorious person on the face of the planet.
Well, I think Kim Jong-il is the most glorious, beloved. They write stories about fantastic things.
In his own country.
Yeah. Well, I don't think even Germans, or maybe if they'd won.
That's the point.
If they had won, the Germans would probably feel that he was a successful man. But, you can't go doing the things they did, which came out of the Nuremberg war crimes trials, the term genocide.
Yes.
And even if the Germans had won, they would have the problem of genocide. Now, it's a bit like, even though the British have given so much good, all we're hearing about is slavery and colonialism and their terrible owning of about 3/4 of the world under the British Empire. All one needs to do is go and look at those countries.
Are they better off today than they would have been if they were left to their own devices? Well, how do we test that? In a scientific world, you can't clone two things and say, we're just going to leave this one alone and this one's now going to be taken over by the British and helped along. We can't do that. I think if you looked at them today, just like we have in our own country with the indigenous issues of it's our land, you stole it from us. We're all living in it today. We're all benefiting from it today. We can't rewrite the past. We just need to be able to learn from it. And we need to focus on the problems of today.
I think you're right. And I think most people, if you're speaking, would say, I agree with you, Colin. But the problem is the media or articles come out and focus on the negative.
And that's the issue.
I mean, I speak to many people. I do public speaking.
Yes.
And the amount of people, both young and middle and old, who are sick to death of Aboriginal issues.
And look, it can be just that way, because there is a perception that we have paid for it or we have looked after them for a very long time. Whether that's right or wrong, I'm not here to say.
No.
But on the flip side of the coin, let's look at it from this point of view. If the media was banned, or if there was an agreement that we were not going to talk about Aboriginal issues on Australia Day, we were just going to celebrate the day.
Australia, yeah.
Do you think that there would be such a stigma around Australia Day because we wouldn't be having the conversation? The media force us to.
Yes.
By raising it every Australia Day. Now, there is an unwritten rule, or there is a written rule in community radio, but an unwritten rule in the media that we will not discuss or publicise suicide. And at the height of COVID and a few other places, the GFC, the suicide rates were horrendous around the country.
All right.
You never ever heard that because we have a policy not to. Why? We don't want to promote it, one, and give people ideas, but two, we're focusing on a very horrendous negative, right?
Yes.
If we applied that out in other areas, and the media will say we have a right to know, we should know about the pluses and the minuses in our society so that we can deal with it and focus on it, as opposed to today when we see negative after negative after negative after negative. I'd love to have a statement where we balance out the negative with the positive,
Yes.
but we don't.
And I think quite clearly we're not doing it. You're right. I think quite clearly because the negative always seems to be attractive in the news stream.
Cycle.
And
we can find it all the way along. It just comes down to a point of view, does it not?
It does.
So the English Navy, or the English...
The Royal Navy.
had a hand in Fiji in the early days, becoming who and what it is today.
Yep.
It had a hand in any number of countries being who and what they are today. You could even say that they were of great assistance or a founding member of the United States way back when, before they turfed them out on their ear and said, no, we don't like you anymore.
Yes.
I think it was taxation without representation that they didn't really they had a big issue with.
Well, that was wrong, wasn't it? That was simply wrong. And so that was a good motive to protest and be anti-British. You're treating us as second-class citizens when the majority, virtually all of the people who came to America from 1603 up to 1776 were Anglo-Saxon Celtic.
Now, I'm sure if you looked at the Fijian story of the Royal Navy or the English involvement in the society it's become today, there will be people who could look at that from a negative standpoint. But there could also be people who look at it and go, we wouldn't be who we are today without that.
Well, I think all you've got to do is look at all the former places that were British: India, Pakistan, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Canada, US, Australia, New Zealand, all adopted either a congressional, because there was no king, or a parliamentary system of government. Well, to look and say, well, where did that come from?
Sure.
It came from the British. And so English is the international language. People are saying it'll be Chinese soon. Well, if it is, then people will have to become skilled in Mandarin because that's the official government language. And so times go like in the Roman Empire, Latin was the lingua franca, and everyone and every scholar had to be able to converse and read and write in Latin. Now, that's a dead language virtually now.
It is.
And so that I think you've touched on it a number of times, there has to be a more balanced way of looking at ourselves. Don't keep concentrating on where we've failed, because you said it before, when you've got failure, the smart thing is to look and examine what can I learn from this?
Sure.
Why didn't we do it? Why did we fail? And so that doesn't seem to be of utmost importance today in modern Western society. And all one has to do is read, which I have, the Muslim Brotherhood's concept of government, written in 1928. And heaven help us if Islam does become the world form of government, does take over England, Great Britain, Australia. Well, I don't know how it could do it in Australia, but it could, because the average statistics for every one baby born to a non-Muslim family, there are 5 born in Muslim families. So let's just say that did happen. Well, then you could kiss goodbye to concepts of women's rights, equality, freedom of speech, a parliamentary government, because you wouldn't be governed by a parliament. And the other most shameful thing, and if this is what I've heard today, and we'll discuss it, the abolition of a Remembrance Day, that means you're turning to all those men and women who died between 1914 and 1918, between 1939 and 1945, to halt authoritarian government, initially taking over Europe, and then in the Second World War, taking over the world again. Japan was never colonised. It was always fiercely independent, totally different culture from Western Europe and Great Britain. Yet look at them. They're one of the healthiest, most robust parliamentary democracies in the world. Now, Thailand was never colonised either, but it struggled. It is struggling. But I'm told that the new first-time woman Prime Minister in Japan is the Iron Lady of Japan. So,
wow.
Yeah, interesting to see. So, again, I come back to what you've quite rightly raised. We really need to be more balanced in our assessment of ourselves first.
I agree. And again, look, I heard a comment recently, well, we've got to focus on the positive. I think there's danger just in that as well.
Definitely.
Light and dark, plus or minus, negatives and positives, right and wrongs. We just need to decide. And again, you shouldn't sit there and look at a right and go, oh, well, that was perfect. It never is.
No.
What can we learn?
Yeah.
What can we learn?
How can we improve?
How can we improve? And that's the same in the negative.
But the trouble is when you try to improve on something that is working okay, you can very easily tip over
Yes.
and start to draw down from it. You know, like I noticed during the week that in New South Wales Supreme Court there was in Queensland, the overturning of a parliamentary act halting transgender giving gender affirming drugs to under 18-year-olds. Queensland Supreme Court judge overturned that, and they're out in the streets now saying victory, victory. Now, freedom of expression, your rights, but when you've got to make sure when you're doing something, you're not abusing other people's rights.
Look, it's a difficult one, David. We've got protections in place currently in our society for those who aren't able to make the proper, and I've got to be very careful.
Informed decision.
Yeah, informed decision. We won't let you drink until you're 18. We won't let you drive a vehicle until you're 16 and a half, 17.
Vote at 18.
Vote at 18. These protections were put in place for a reason way back when.
Yes.
And those reasons are still valid today.
Well, there was a recognition, and that's what I remember when reading psychology papers saying that the human brain, certainly the male brain, does not fully mature until the age of 25.
And that would be fair.
And that's why you got 20-year-old fighter pilots in the Battle of Britain, because they were prepared to do things that you at 25, 26 would have said, oh, heavens, I'm not doing that.
Yes.
And that was the whole idea of it. They didn't shirk from that. We need younger men. That's why over the age of 22, it was virtually impossible to train as a fighter pilot in the Second World War. You either had to have a pilot's license beforehand.
All right, we're at the end of the program, David. Quick summary.
Well, I think it can easily be summed up in that we've got to be more balanced in the way we look at ourselves. We have to be more fair. We have to identify clearly the negative, identify clearly the positive, and work out in the negative, we've got to stop this, or what do we do? With the positive, we have to work out, can we improve upon it? Is it amendable? Can we amend it? Or is it just universal? freedom of speech, freedom of association. Because the one thing, we won't let people associate with these groups.
Yes.
Then are you not pulling down from freedom of association? Then someone says, yes, but the Australian Nazi Party is an outlawed party. But so those people who want to associate with other Nazis, they're not free. And you've got to say, because the society has made the decision that that is a freedom too far, like a bridge too far in Arnhem during the Second World War. That's a freedom gone too far. We won't allow that.
David Ashton-Lewis, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you again.
You've been listening to 4CRB's interviews and talkback series. Support local online content and become a financial supporter today at 4crb.com.